Hey YouTube! Congrats on being done with the December test. Welcome to our tutor reaction video today. I'm so excited to break down the test with one of my colleagues. But before we get into that, there's a couple things I wanted to mention to all of you guys that joined with us today. The first thing is the chat is visible and Pranoy and I are going to be checking out your questions. We're definitely going to be answering some today and responding to you guys, but please be sure that you don't talk specifics about questions because that's part of College Board's rules. So if you start getting into details like, oh, you know, that cylinder question with a height of 10 and a radius of 5, what did you put? That's not kosher. Like, we don't want to do that. We don't want to get in trouble, right? And they could take down this video. So let's just keep it, you know, like general. And also everybody gets different forms. So to be honest with you guys, like, I was talking to a couple people yesterday who had similar math questions to me, but different numbers. So they're going to change things up depending on the form where you're not going to get the same answer as a person sitting next to you anyways. So talking about questions in detail is a moot point. The other thing I wanted to tell you guys about is we're giving away something new for free right now. So we were giving away our English workbook for a while. I know that there's a lot of you guys that are just starting prep. You're new sophomores or juniors to the process. So we have this test tracker tool that's really amazing. Let me just explain how it works. Let's see. Okay, so the first thing I want to show you guys is what your score report is going to look like when you get your December results back. So as you can see, it's very generic. It's very rudimentary. You don't get a lot of information. They break it down into 4 general categories for English and 4 for math. And then if you miss a bar, like this one's 12 to 14 questions. So each bar on these, since there's 7 bars, is worth roughly 2 questions. So you don't know what kind of questions they were specifically, you know, like, were they inferences? Were they command of evidence? It's hard to determine. So this doesn't give you a lot of information, but honestly, College Board is not in the analytical business. So they're not really concerned as much about giving robust reporting. That being said, there's something that we have that's a great tool to help you in your prep process. So it's a test tracker tool, and I'll just show you guys how it works real quick. So each tab is a different Blue Book test. So when you take a Blue Book test, you can enter your answers into this tracker. I just did test 5 as an example. So I pretended I got the harder second module. If you get the harder second module, you don't fill in this column. This is the easier one. And then once you have all your data in, and it reflects your wrong answers. So as you can see, these are the ones I got wrong. If you go to opportunity areas, then it can tell you on a more granular level where you need some work. Like, for instance, I see inferences, I'm only getting half of them right. So out of 4 questions, I missed 2. That's probably an area I want to work on more. So it's a really great tool to get down into the details. Like in grammar, I need to work on boundaries, which are like punctuation questions. Then you can go to College Board's question bank. You just Google College Board question bank and filter to these specific types of questions based on their category and what they're called. So this is so awesome. We use it with so many of our students. I will say, you know, shout out to Danny Beloved with NTPA. He created this spreadsheet. It's just a really awesome tool. So right now, if you go to our website, strategictestprep.com, and there's going to be a box that pops up. You just fill out your information with your email. You'll be on our email list, and we'll email you the test tracker. So that's it for me. That's like a little holiday gift going on, but I'm really excited for the guest that I have today, guys. His name is Pranoy Mohaptra. I knew I was going to butcher that. And he has been in the game about as long as I have. I think he started test prep in 2008. He owns a company called PM Tutors. It's based in New Jersey. And he took the test yesterday with me. We were texting back and forth all day. I'm really excited to have him on. So let's welcome him to the stage. Welcome, Pranoy.
Hi, Laura. Hi, everyone.
Hi. Let's get right into it, shall we? I mean, this is why everybody's here. They want to hear our take. They want to hear our expert analysis. So
Absolutely.
the first thing I wanted to know, in your opinion, is what half of the test, if any, did you think was harder on this December SAT?
You know what? I think it's interesting because I really didn't think either section of the test was hard. For me, I probably mismanaged my time worse on math. So I did end up just at the very last second having to shoot up a last second ball on a question that honestly, if I managed my time better and didn't spend so long, analyzing and double checking questions earlier on, probably could have and should have gotten to the reading. I found pleasantly straightforward. The texts weren't all necessarily too simple, but what I thought was really nice about the reading was that the question answer complexity wasn't as complicated as I was expecting. So once you really get a good understanding of the text, I found that just navigating between the answer choices was a lot simpler than I had anticipated.
Yeah, I would agree with all of your points. That math question that you had, I know exactly what it was. And I also spent an exorbitant amount of time on it. And unfortunately, didn't get it before time ran out, which was so frustrating to me. And this is one thing that, it's a nuance to the digital SAT that I lament over sometimes, which is how we do have variations in forms. Mm-hmm. Because even though theoretically we're supposed to be tested on the same types of concepts and everything, there is a almost like a lack of standardization when they do that, where mm-hmm. I spoke to another one of our colleagues, who's 𝗙𝗲𝗲, who is in California. He took the test yesterday and his math modules were entirely different than mine. He didn't get that crazy question that we got.
Interesting.
I know. And his was super straightforward. I mean, granted, the rest of the math did feel very easy to me. Yeah. Like everything was very basic. Everything, even like on module 2, it felt much more basic for the most part than normal. But he would.
And you know what's interesting is, as tutors, and we might get to this later on, but mm-hmm. I'm always looking at questions of just not what do I think, but this is what the students are going to think about it. And there were some like questions where I'm like, I can see how this would look intimidating to a student, but it's really not, right? And you know how they always come at you with, there were a lot of constants and letters and they get scared about that. And then there's just also just subtle things that if you notice, like at the end of the day, just like get your common denominators and you're good there. There was one actually that if you knew difference of squares, just really, really simple question. And we haven't seen that pop up really in a while. So yeah, I kind of understand when the students say like, oh, there were intimidating questions. And there were some where I'm looking at them like, oh, wow. And then like I read and think a little longer. I'm like, oh, duh,
And that was my experience too. So I ran into a question that dealt with, generalizing a sample size to a larger mm-hmm. population. And it was a huge paragraph. So when I got to it, it just looked like too much to sift through. And typically I can find the question easily enough where I can identify what they're testing. And then if I can identify that type of question, I know I don't need to read the full paragraph. Right. But it was kind of embedded within the paragraph and hidden where I honestly could not identify what type of question it was. So I flagged it to come back to. Mm-hmm. And then I came back to it later in Pranoy. I was drawing pictures because they were talking about two different fields. So I'm like making my diagrams and I'm ready for the sophisticated question. Then I get down to the end and I go, that's what they wanted. Right. Which that could have been another minute for me to work on the other question that we needed to work on. So it is what it is. But it's weird. And tell me because I know you've been doing test prep for a long time, if you've noticed this, and I'm wondering if they're moving in this direction or if this is just test specific, because I remember when they released the last iteration of the SAT, the math was super hard. And then every year it felt like they kept lowering the bar a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And like this test was reminiscent of that for me. It's like, are they lowering the bar on math mm-hmm. to meet students where they're at? Or is this just an isolated incident? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and we briefly discussed this yesterday. Again, I think a lot of these questions were almost designed to be like intimidating more so than actually challenging, which is, an important note. And also, the questions weren't necessarily getting like harder. Like there were questions that I would be like consider, oh, this is complex, tricky. There's something to really work through and think through here. And then you click next, and the next question is like, oh, this is like 30 seconds, type this into Desmos, or not even, right? Like, a quick percent change question, and like a simple one at that. So one thing that I do miss about the paper test is that, and I appreciate it more after yesterday, but on the paper test, if you're working on a question, at least in your periphery, you could see all the other questions that are coming up. And I really think that helps plan skipping and budgeting time better, because, me being hard-headed, I'm just like, I'm going straight through. So I do think the digital aspect of it, just planning the order that you're attacking the questions, has to be part of your strategy that it wasn't really as big of a deal with on the paper test.
That's such a good point. And here's one thing I think that adds to the complexity now on the digital SAT, because I even noticed this last month when I took November, which, I guess in retrospect, the question I just asked you, if I throw it back on myself, I'm thinking, maybe this December is an isolated incident and they're not necessarily lowering the bar, because November was very challenging for math, in my opinion. But the thing that a lot of people are observing, which I also observed, is that the difficulty of the math questions, it doesn't seem to always go in a linear fashion where it's going from easiest to hardest. I had a very strange block of like 2 or 3 questions on my module 2 that were seemingly easy.
Yeah.
In the middle of the module. And I'm like, this is really odd. And I know on past tests, I've talked to students who've taken the test afterwards, and they were like, Laura, the hardest questions were numbers 17 to 19, and then 20 to 22 were easier.
Yeah.
Which also makes it hard to plan. I mean, like, do they have time to click through every question and survey and look at them,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And honestly, like I don't know about click through and survey, but I will probably be advising students to be more ready to move on from a question. Like really just emphasize that point a little more than I usually do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I usually tell students, like, if you look at the question and feel confident in your first step, write it out, get through the question. But if you look at a question and you just feel doubtful and you don't feel like your setup is just exactly what you should be doing, I think students need to be ready to just like click next at that point.
I agree. I think that was a big difference for me personally on the November test versus the December test. And I took the December test strictly for ego reasons. November did not go as well as I wanted it to, and so
it's probably good that you did that, like in retrospect, like not just for ego, but just to notice the difference between the two tests like a month apart,
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, we're in the middle of the school year, right? And typically the patterns are established for the school year, and I anticipate a lot of these things continuing into March, May, and June. But where was I going with this? Oh my gosh, now I'm losing my train of thought. Oh, so on November, my biggest issue, Pranoy, because I hadn't taken like a timed actual test in a center in a year, was my time management, especially on English. So this time around, when I took December, I was literally just in I'm going to skip this one and come back to it mode. And it worked really well for me. Like, particularly with a few of the reading passages that were super scientific, because I almost have to, like, my cognitive load on those increases and I need more attention and more focus, where I started to read a couple of them and I was like, not right now. Like, I just wasn't feeling it. I wasn't in the mood for it. So I skipped it and came back to it. And then I was super like locked in, and it worked out great. So I'm going to echo that with my students too. It's all about like prioritizing.
What order do you do the reading and writing questions in?
Well, so I switched it up. So after like 2023, when I was tutoring international kids, I started saying, hey, go to number 15, do the grammar first, work to the end, then go back to number 1.
Yeah.
Here was the one downside I noticed to doing that way. For me personally, and I think for some of my students, what that did was it left all of the reading questions for last.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like 10 reading questions in a row takes a lot of demand, you know, like cognitively, and a lot of focus. I like to break it up. So now what I do is I start at the end at 27 and work backwards.
Interesting.
And then when I hit number 15, I skip the first 5 reading passages because they're the most challenging typically. Yeah. Then I do the first half of the reading passages. Then I use the vocabulary, the words in context as a break. So I get a little reprieve, and then I go back and I do the hardest ones last.
It sounds complicated, but like I get it. Like I get the logic.
Right. And I think about that with my students, and some students really, they lean into it and they love it and they'll ride with it. But then there's other students who, I mean, I'm always customizing, and I will never, I will never make a student do something they're not comfortable with, because I feel like it's half a psychological battle. Like, I want my students going in there feeling super confident in themselves. And if I'm making them do something that doesn't fit them and they feel uncomfortable, they won't perform well. So we've done a lot of different things. Why? I want to know your method. What's your method?
We do words in context, skip to grammar, and then get back to where you left off after words in context and straight through. I think you're probably right on the whole mental capacity and load thing. But for us, like for some students, honestly, a lot of students, right? I think the target score matters too, because there's some students who are like, I just don't care about the support and inference questions, you know? And it almost feels more like ACT tutoring, where there's like a pretty significant number of students where I'm like, we don't care. Like, you don't have to finish the test. Like, it's okay. If you run out of time on, honestly, like 3 questions, like one of our tutors took, I want to say it was like Blue Book Test 8, or it might have been 7. I don't know. But literally just like didn't get to 3 inference and support questions and still got like a 760 on that on that section. So for a lot of students, it's like, we're going to leave them to last. And guess what? Even if you don't get them, like, I don't know if I necessarily care.
That's awesome. Yeah. You know, for us, sometimes that's tricky, because I don't know if I've shared this with you, but I would say the large majority of our student population is strategic test prep wants over 1,500.
Yeah.
So, you know,
but even then, right? Like, I mean, like I said, you could hit a 760 and like get 4 wrong in there.
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah. But like, is that the exception or the norm though? Because like,
I'd love to play around with that a little bit more, because right now we're, especially with the students in the middle of the school year, you know, oh, I'm so worried about running out of time. So I actually do think I might run a little bit of experimenting and just see like how often you could just not answer or guess on really 3 of those like just dense reading questions and just see what happens to the score, as long as you're like kicking ass on everything else, you know?
That's a really good idea.
Yeah.
And, you know, to piggyback off that, that's why I usually refrain from taking, like, if students come to us with a baseline score, but it's third party, like it's a Princeton review test or something, I really take those scores with a grain of salt, because I think it's difficult to drill down on College Board's scoring algorithm. And I find that those scores typically are more wonky. Do you agree with that?
I think so too. Yeah. I mean, we've had kids, you know, and I actually have like a folder of just like screenshots of just like, you know, parent says, oh, they got this. And I'm like, no, let's come in and take a blue book. And like, like pretty different. Because God forbid you set just crazy expectations based on a fake test, you know?
Exactly. Now let's talk about the content a little bit more. Was there anything unique or interesting to you that you hadn't seen before on an SAT?
I don't know about hadn't seen before, but I think some variations in questions that are interesting and different. I think there were a lot of independent clauses that didn't sound like independent clauses. Like, they were just very carefully, you know, structured so that they involved long noun phrases up front or gerunds, right? So they really, really wanted to test students on like, do you actually understand what an independent clause is? Because there's some where it's just very simple. That's a sentence. Like a 3rd grader would be able to figure it out. So I think the sentence complexity was a little trickier. I think the bullet point questions, writer's goals questions, whatever you want to call those, however you categorize them, there were more of them and they were more complex, which in my opinion, I like, you know, I like when they test, you know, something meaningful. So for those, I found myself needing to refer back to the bullet points more often than usual. And I think on at least one of them, I found myself not only looking to confirm with the bullet points, but I almost had to like synthesize the bullet points, a couple of bullet points together into another main point. The 3-in-1 rule didn't work on any of the verbs questions I had. Mind you, I think I only had one verb question.
And wait, can I interject? So for those of you watching, that when Pranoy says the 3-in-1 rule, he's talking about like, if you watch my channel, the pronoun trick, where you test singular plural, so you use he and they, and then the one that's different is typically the one that's right. Pranoy calls it the what do you call it again?
The 3-in-1 rule. Yeah.
The 3-in-1 rule. And that's the one thing that's funny about grammar. And I know we've talked about this before. Like Pranoy and I are both in the National Test Prep Association, and everybody kind of has their own flavor with how they like teach grammar. Like we have different terminology and stuff like that, but like it's all the same stuff when you boil it down.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
anything else?
The it-they test, you know, and like I said, I thought the complexity of the reading and writing answer choices was simpler than anticipated because I was kind of panicking. I got, you know, I spent a long time on those writer's goal bullet point questions because, like I said, I do the grammar, you know, right after the words in context. And then when I was getting back to the reading comprehension stuff, I'm like, crap, I only have like 12 minutes to answer like 8 questions. And honestly, like I got through them all and felt pretty comfortable with my answer choices because once I had an understanding of what I was looking for, the answer choices did feel, one, straightforward, and two, importantly, different enough where I was very, very decisively able, like, okay, it's not that, it's not that. Like, this is the only one that even mentions what I'm looking for. And like, I don't even have to think too hard about the nuances and connections between it, you know?
Yeah, that's like a big reading strategy we teach our students too. It's more about finding 3 wrong answers than 1 right answer, right? And that process of elimination piece, I think, is so key because I find that when students, they approach a reading question looking for the right answer, it's so easy for them to pick a trap answer. You know,
and that's why it's important to understand like the structure of how the SAT likes to trap you as well, right? Like knowing what common traps they like to throw at you and being able to identify them quickly, I think reduces the mental load so much, right? Because the second you see the word like will, you know, something too extreme or something certain, you're just like, I'm not even going to read the rest of this. Like, this is wrong, you know? Or if you just notice that it states something that's true, but it isn't answering the question. Okay, I'm not going to think about that any longer. So yeah, like being able to just understand what you're looking for in wrong answers and being able to just toss them quickly is really helpful.
Yeah, I know I didn't have this on my list of questions for you, but I noticed a question coming through the chat earlier, and it was someone speaking on, is my question experimental? Because there's one question that the kids keep talking about, and I'm not going to go into detail on it. They're calling it the guinea pig question.
Oh, I don't have it. Yeah.
Well, I did, but I'm not going to speak on it and go into detail. But you know, I think a lot of the kids, they're feeling not very confident with this guinea pig question, and they're wondering if, since not everybody got it, does that mean it's experimental?
To be honest, I feel like I've discussed with so many tutors, and it feels like there's more than 4 total questions that, like, you know, or it would be 4 per section, right? So there'd be more than 4 per section that people had different questions for. So I don't know if I necessarily buy into the, if everyone didn't get it, then it's experimental.
Yeah. Right. I mean, on the flip side, I could almost make a case for, if everybody got it, then it's experimental. Because you would think if they're testing new questions, they want as much data as possible.
Yeah.
But of all my conversations yesterday, I have yet to run into somebody who, it sounds like, had the same exact test as I did. There's been variations with everybody I've spoken with. I mean, is the same true for you?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and we can talk about this offline. There's someone else in our industry who I think his test aligned almost, like, as far as I can tell, like perfectly with yours. I'll connect you two later.
Oh, that's so interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see.
He's talking about questions, and I'm like, this sounds like my conversation with Laura.
Oh, that's so funny. Well, let's talk Desmos real quick, because I've, you know, had a love affair with Desmos. I would marry Desmos if I could. Well, how useful do you think Desmos was on this test, or did you find that more questions were, it was more efficient to solve them by hand?
Okay, so I had a weird glitch. Like maybe 2/3 of the way through reading, like my screen went from like full screen to like half a screen, and it was still functional and I was still able to test. And like I tried to troubleshoot it for like, I'm just like, did I accidentally click a setting or something? But where that really got annoying was Desmos, because like it was just really, really scrunched up and I wasn't able to like really use it effectively. But I think I used it maybe 3 times. And I think 2 of the times it was really just to like check my work for a question, just to like be sure. I used like one regression, and that was like it was a linear question, and I was just being lazy and didn't feel like doing the work. And then I think 2 of them were like solutions questions. One of them I had solved, by hand and just wanted to like make sure again. And then I think the last question on the test, like I truly did just blast through Desmos.
I seriously can't believe that happened to you though in Blue
Right.
Book.
Yeah.
What kind of device were you on? Just curious.
It was. I'll show you it. Yeah, it's a Dell Inspiron 15. This is my boy for yesterday.
Okay, so everybody out there, listen up. Do not use a Dell. It's 15 on your test. Oh my gosh. I
Yeah.
know that's the one downside to tech. I felt so badly for some of the kids in my room yesterday because, of course, they couldn't connect to the Wi-Fi or there was some kind of issue. And then they had to go down to tech support. And
Yeah.
you don't want to start out a test that way. It just creates anxiety. It puts you in like that fight or flight mode and not the right frame of mind. So I felt so badly for them that they had to go figure that out.
For sure.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, I feel like Desmos for me, I used it more kind of like what you were saying to check answers. Like on my module 1, and you might do the same thing. I always do every question twice.
Right. Yeah.
Yes, because it's just they're easy questions and there's so much time left. And I feel like the easier the question is, the easier it is to
The
make
more likely you are to be like, yeah, whatever, and do things like solve for Y when the question asks for X, or like
Yeah,
do some sloppy distribution, like so. Yeah, and
exactly.
that's exactly why I kind of screwed myself on like module 2 is like I was doing every question 2, maybe even 3 times, and then I'm just like, oh crap, like I gotta get a move on,
Yes, I know time management is key on both module 2s,
Yeah.
really. Vocab, just curious, how difficult do you think the vocab was for you on this test?
I thought it was medium. I mean, like there were definitely questions that had like tricky words, but nothing which just was like, because I was talking to another tutor who actually tested in the same center as me. And I'm just like, I really do hate that they've moved back to including occasionally words that's just like, no one uses this word. No one knows what this word means. I think they were very, very intentional on the paper SAT when they said, yeah, we're not going to test like words no one's heard of anymore because like why? And now they're going back to that. And I'm just like, but no, there wasn't anything absolutely crazy.
Mhm.
Everything I at least had heard of the word could work back into context. Or, there was one word that was like tricky and then 3 that I was confident just didn't work.
Yeah, well, shout out to Brian Eufinger on that because this is why I think he loves the ACT so much. He always makes fun of the SAT for the vocab. He's like, no one knows these words. Like,
Yeah.
and that's true. Interesting comment in the chat. Pixel said, could the standard deviation table question be experimental? Now, Pixel, we're not going into details with the questions, but I will say, I think Pranoy and I have been debating maybe a question like that one. And we had different answers. So that'll be really interesting.
Yeah.
And the tough thing is you never know at the end of the day what the experimental were because they don't release QAS reports anymore.
Yeah. And this is where I kind of mentioned. So this, for anyone watching, this is the first time I've taken the digital. I used to take March and October on paper religiously. And on the paper test, I feel like it was a lot easier and more predictable to just know what I was looking at and know the things that stuck out. On this test, if you're a tutor taking this test, you go in and you have to make a decision. Am I here to get, a highest possible score, right? Am I chasing a 1600? Or am I here to really just learn about the test and gain some insights for my students? Because doing both of those things at once is much harder than it used to be.
Yes, and I hope you guys all heard that. So in November, I was really going in there to see what was on the test. And you guys were making fun of my 1540, and I don't like it because he's right. You have to make a decision, you know? So fortunately, I feel like even though this time, you know, because I got roasted so bad on social about my 1540, I did go into this test trying to do better, just to save face here. But I still remembered a lot of the questions, which was kind of cool. So I don't know if that's going to be a good thing or a bad thing for me at the end of the day. But yeah. Pranoy, what do you think you got on this test if you had to estimate?
I mean, I'd like to say somewhere in the 1550 area. And like, I mean, I don't think I made any sloppy mistakes. I mean, but nobody ever thinks they did, right? But I mean, to that point, yeah, I did truly do each question like twice. So I feel pretty confident in everything I answered, except for like two that, I mean, the one question that you and I talked about, one word and context question where I think I was just looking for like the wrong vibe right out of the gate, and that one math question. So those three I think I got wrong. And then there's probably one or two other questions out there, but who knows?
I think it's going to be fun to see, since we had so many of our colleagues go in and take this one, to see where everybody's score shakes out for bragging rights purposes. So little friendly competition.
For sure.
This is
and well, it's fun. It stinks because our conference is next weekend. I wish we'd all have our scores by then.
I know, that would be so awesome. I didn't think about that.
We could all just check our scores together.
I want to get into a controversial topic, and we're close to wrapping up. We're already at the half an hour point, but this has been such a touchy subject, and I think that there's a dividing line with tutors on this, where some are in the camp of no, they're solid representation of the real test, and then others are saying nah, not quite. But what's your stance on if the blue book practice tests are representative of what you see in the real test?
I think it's almost a misnomer of like representative, right? Like, I don't think they should be perfectly representative, right? Like, I don't think you should see some version of every single question if you take the blue book, right? I will say, if you've taken all the blue book tests, you've done all the question bank stuff, you've been tested on every single concept that they can throw at you, period. Like, it's just undeniable. I think students get shaken up by questions that are formatted differently. Maybe they introduce a different wrinkle into it, but I mean, it's all there. So I think the difficulty is about on par. And I will say, yeah, some blue book tests, like 7, for example, I think the reading and writing just is harder, but that theoretically should all be accounted for in the scoring. And that's something that I really emphasize to students, right? Like, it's not going to be perfectly predictable. You have to be, one, ready to move on from a question. And two, also, I mean, and again, right, like, practice what you preach. Like, I saw some questions just like you did, right? And you're just like, oh my God. And you just have to take a second, just like, okay, remind myself, like, I've seen this all before. I know all the underlying concepts. Like, you just really have to be ready to not freak out when you see something that, and I really get it when they say, there were things I've never seen before. Because, like, there's a handful of questions where I'm like, yeah, they're totally going to frame this as, we've never done anything like that. And we have.
I know, it's so true. Yeah. I have a question in the chat I think we should address. It says it's from FJ Zugzugd. I can't pronounce that. But we have, is it guaranteed that there's at least one experimental per SAT? Pranoy, you want to take that?
I mean, there's at least 2 per module. Not at least. There are 2. It's exactly 2 per module.
Exactly. Yeah. So that means there's 8, you guys. There's 8 experimental questions per test. So just keep that in mind. But honestly, it doesn't really matter where they are or how many they are. Your goal is to do the very best you can on every single question, right? So because
that's why it's designed that way.
Exactly. Because
on the old test, when you knew section 5 didn't count, then it's not good data for them, because everyone knows it doesn't matter.
Yeah, this is definitely a better way for them to go about it, for sure.
And it's kind of how the ACT has moved in that direction now too. I really liked how the old SAT did it, where it was like 10 sections and one of the sections just didn't count, but you don't know which one.
Yeah. By the way, I have to thank you guys for the love in the chat. I've got TXQ9ZC said half these people roasting you for 1540, but I'd like to see them do the same.
Yeah,
And then,
statistically speaking, still deep into the top 1 percentile.
Yes, Ahan said, made fun of a 1540. Who are these people? Thank you, guys.
They're haters.
They get it.
More, we talked about this like yesterday as well. Like, I don't think most tutors are out there just ripping 1600s, and frankly, I think it makes us more relatable, right? I mean, I've pulled up questions where like the things, and God, they haunt me, you know. But the questions I miss, like, it's the same exact things that I warn my students about, and if I don't practice what I preach. And I promise you guys, I'm better than you. Why? Because I've been doing this for like over a decade professionally. I study for the SAT all day, every day. And if I can make a mistake, right? If I can get sloppy with mental math, I promise you can too. If I can miss what they're actually asking for or miss a small detail, if I'm not writing every single thing down on paper to make sure I'm organized, guess what? You can mess that up too, right? If I mess it up, you can mess it up, and I practice what I preach, or I try to. And if I don't, I face the consequences.
Yeah, I mean, I've even in a session done something like I'd work through a question with a student where I try to cut a corner, right? Or I do something that I tell my students not to do.
Yep.
And if I get it wrong in the session with them, I'm like, look, this is exactly why I tell you guys not to do it. So I'm totally good with like
changing answers, you know. And in fact, I've gotten to the point where like once I finish a test, I don't go back. I'm just, that's it. I'm done, because I'm almost always going to go and just overthink something and change a right answer to a wrong answer with my extra time.
Yeah, that's a good point. Supernova said, how many do you think you got wrong in November, Laura? I mean, we don't know for sure, but like once you're in the 1500s, it's like a matter of like a question or two, you know, right? Pranoy, like a 1540 versus like a 1560. It's like one question.
Right.
So,
and I mean, when you think about it, like 22 questions on math, 2 of them don't count. Like nearly 10% of the test doesn't count, right? Like, you know, I've had kids get 800s and like they missed 2 questions, you know? So
someone called you Mr. Mohaptra. They said,
you can call me Pranoy. It's cool.
I know, I love that. Yeah, Pranoy and Laura is fine, you guys. They wanted to know what you thought you got. Well, he already answered that. So he said he thinks he's like in the mid 1500s,
which is about normal.
Yeah. Let's take one more question. We have, am I cooked if I got an easier module 2 in both English and math? It's because the classroom's teacher kept talking and made me lose focus.
I can take this one. Hey, to be honest with you, the more I think about it, I don't think kids are great at identifying whether or not they got the easier second module. Like, I've had kids who are just like, I definitely got the second easier module, and like they come out with scores that indicate there's no way they got the easier second module. And of course, cooked is all relative, right? I mean, if you're shooting for a mid 1500, yeah, you're absolutely cooked if you got the easier second module. But, you know, again, like, I don't think my math module 2 was that much more. It definitely wasn't an easy module 2. This is really a question that only students who have actually gotten an easy module 2 and have felt the easiness of an easy module 2 can answer. But I didn't think my module 2 was that much easy, or rather harder. And I promise you, I didn't get the easier module 2.
Yeah. I see lots of questions in the chat about, oh, you know, how many do I need to miss to get a 1500? It seems like you guys really want to know like what your margin for error is. And again, every test scores a little bit differently, and it's hard to predict exactly how many it would be. And different questions are worth different points. But I will show you a tool that could give you a very rough estimate of your score, just so you're aware that it exists. It's just nice to kind of have like a general idea, but I can't stress this enough, guys. This is not completely accurate. Okay. So essentially Albert.io came out with a score calculator. They do a lot of like AP exam prep stuff. So if you Google digital SAT score calculator, you can click, it's going to be the first thing that comes up. And then essentially you just put in your numbers. Now, what's funny is it does include the experimental. As you can see, this is out of 27 and out of 22, and technically it should be out of 25 and out of 20. So like I said, it's not going to be accurate, but if you think maybe you got 1 wrong on module 1 English and 3 wrong on module 2 English, you can type your numbers in, and then that would give you a general sense of roughly around what you would score. So that's something you can use if you just want to get like a general idea. All right, Pranoy, I guess we're coming to the end of the video. Right. It's been 40 amazing minutes, and I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your expertise with us. Do you have any like last words that you want to leave with all the students watching today, or?
Yeah, again, like Laura said, worry less about right and wrong and worry more about doing the best you can on the test. And one thing that I will really just get back to, with my students is be more ready and willing to skip questions and don't beat yourself up too hard over any single question, because, and it's something I've always told my students, but especially taking my first digital SAT, I could see how it's so much easier to over fixate on one question than it really ever used to be. So yeah, I'm sure you guys all did great. And I promise that you're more worried about fewer questions than you should be.
That's awesome, Pranoy. Thank you for sharing that. If you guys want to work with Pranoy and PM Tutors, the link to his website is down in the description. As always, we are accepting new students, not as always, right now, sorry, we are accepting new students for 2026. We just finished with our December cohort. So if you want to work with us, you can also head to our website, strategictestprep.com, and request a consultation as well. All right, Pranoy, it's been awesome. Thanks for coming.
Catch you next